command iDrive. I'm just going to close, let's just close this one tab here. Because it works, and it works really well. I don't want this open here. So if I were to open this other page like PCMag or Tom's guide, Tom says that iDrive is the best overall. I just picked one up. So Dropbox is the other one I was thinking of. You can back up to any one of these services. So if you're talking about backing up to Dropbox somewhere, where are you backing up to? Backing up to the cloud. Where's the cloud? In some data center somewhere. Is it in a big room with no cages? We don't know. We don't care. The way it probably actually works is that they probably have a local location here in Seattle, for example. Maybe not Seattle, but in Seattle. So they have to have a disaster recovery plan because they have a reputation and they don't want to lose your stuff. So they take their stuff and they back it up to a data center in Liberty Lake or Spokane. They don't want to buy that whole data center, so what do? They buy a little space in the data center. Might be owned by a company called Rackspace or something else. And in that cage is where they keep the backups of their backups in case there's a disaster like a tsunami or a flood or an earthquake or something. And that's how they protect themselves and do disaster recovery for themselves. When they do it, you don't have to do it. Okay? And that's another thing. If I were to lose my data, I could be pretty secure that iDrive is going to have it somewhere. And if I can't get it back today, I can probably get it back soon. Because they're a business, they have a reputation, and they have to protect that reputation. Because in the computing business, reputation is pretty much everything. Okay. So the question is, do we encrypt or not encrypt? And what do we mean by encryption? Does anybody know?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's coded. It's basically you replace, you substitute letters with numbers, and you can compress it and things like that. Basically, it makes it unreadable unless you have special tools or are very, very, very patient or are going to live for 1,000,000 years, and most of us aren't. But why do you do encryption? Because it gives you some safety. It gives you some privacy as well. Okay, because it can't easily be read and no one can take advantage of you if they can't read your stuff. So for your local backups, you have to assess your needs. How much do I need to encrypt my own stuff and at what level? You need to secure your data somehow, but basically by having it on a disk drive or one of these drives is pretty good for securing it. You can encrypt it there, it makes it safer, but like the first cartoon I had, you can encrypt it so well you can never get to your data. Especially for people who can't remember passwords or long, 64-bit codes and things like that. So you have to, what do I really need? What am I willing to lose? But whenever you go to the cloud, you always want to encrypt, okay? So programs like iDrive and other things like Google and the Apple Cloud and things like that, whenever you're communicating back and forth with there, you're always using an encrypted type connection. And there's certificates and things like that have to be passed back and forth. So you can be fairly secure that your information is relatively safe. I can't say it any better than relatively safe. Steve?
Just to let people know, as club members, we have the Excel spreadsheet with all your data on it that you've given us is encrypted and put in Google Drive. It's encrypted with a program called VeriCrypt that's using something called cascading ciphers that makes it super secure. And I think Bruce could break it in about 2 trillion years.
I think I probably could.
So it's fairly secure.
Right. It is secure. Yeah. I'm not going to be here
Now,
in
if I
2
could
trillion
only
years.
get these people to use it, we'd be good.
I'd be happy if everyone in this room did some kind of offline storage backup, okay? If you just back up your data onto the cloud, you're going to be in pretty decent shape too. So Using file history is another really good thing. There's so many different ways. Those are just 3 of probably a million ways to do it. This is looking at that backup page again. Okay, so let's talk about security a little bit, because you can't really talk about backups without talking a little bit about security. But we're not going to get too deep into it. But in this device protection column here, most of us use Windows Update. We kind of have to, unless you unplug your computer from the internet. You're pretty much forced at this time to use Windows Update by Microsoft. And they're doing that to protect themselves as well as to protect you. I think they're quite invasive. What I hate the most about Windows these days is the Windows Update process. My laptop blue screens now. It never did before. I went to 1903. Now it blue screens occasionally. Threat resistance. When we're talking about a threat, we're talking about viruses, malware, other things that can cause problems on your computer. Well, we have Microsoft Edge, which is the browser, which is soon to be more like Chrome than it is like the current Edge. We have Windows Defender, which is our antivirus, our firewall, which controls traffic coming in and out of our system, and Smart Screen, which is kind of an intelligent way of analyzing different websites to see if they're threatening or not, and that's maintained by Microsoft. We have identity protection. Most of us haven't used Windows Hello. Who's heard of Windows Hello? Windows Hello is basically a way you can use face recognition or thumbprint recognition if you have a reader on your device to log in. Information protection, we have encryption, device encryption. You can encrypt your hard drives. BitLocker is another way of protecting. Breach detection, we have Windows Defender, Advanced Protection. These are things that you may or may not have heard of. But before you have a breach, these are the ones that are the most important. And after you have a breach, if someone actually breaks into your system, you need to start looking at protecting your system even more. Okay? And this is for Windows 10 if you did a fresh install or upgraded from Windows 8, 64 bits. Okay, so we're going to jump into some additional topics, and we've talked about some of these briefly, and I have links under all of these, so if you want to go home and click on them and find out more information about it, that would be a good idea. We don't have time to talk about everything. But so what's a co-location? We've used the term a few times in this meeting today, this briefing. Who knows what a co-location is? If I have my main data center in SPCUG and I want to be protected from an earthquake or a tsunami, what would I do with my data? I would send it to another location, all right? So if I had a data center in SPCUG or in Seattle and I wanted my devices to be protected, I'd either move it to a different location on the west side of the Cascades or move it to the other side of the Cascades, and that would be called a co-location. Okay? It's one of the definitions of co-location. RAID, we already talked about. Redundant, come on Steve, help me out. Array of independent disks or inexpensive disks. There's all kinds of ways of protecting your data, but we're not going to be looking at that in depth at all because that's for larger installations that we're not really worried about, and I don't want to waste your time with it right now. But if you're interested, click on that link and you'll get more information that you want. In fact, let's look at just one link, just real quick here. Just want to show you something that you can and should be doing. I don't know why it's taking so long, but it is. So this is RAID, redundant array of inexpensive disks. If you do a Google search, if you just come down here and put in RAID and hit enter, It takes you to Google. Okay, it gives you a couple of pictures here. Now, of course, you know, you can go to images. Everyone use images? You can click on images here, and it will show you what RAID is. That's not what I was looking for, gang. I was looking for this kind of RAID. So let's put in computer RAID. Okay. That's kind of funny. I brought up that page. COMPUTER RAID. There we go. Now we have our RAID. We have our arrays. We have our disk arrays and things like that. Of all kinds of pictures. We have schematics. We have all kinds of different arrays. And there's RAID 1, RAID 3, RAID 4, RAID 5, RAID 10, RAID 50, RAID 100. There's all kinds of RAID configurations. And with that said, we're going to leave RAID. Because if you're into data storage seriously as a professional, you will want to know everything you can about RAID and SANs and network area storage, but that's not your concern, so we're not going to dwell on it. But we are going to talk about volume, shadow copy, and we are going to talk about Shadow Explorer. Has anybody ever heard of either one of those? Okay, so here's our situation, okay? We're working in our office, we're working at home, and we go to the internet, and we click on that one link. We were kind of mussing. Do we want to click on that link or don't we want to? Well, we click on that link and all of a sudden our computer's hit by malware, okay? And we just created a file called mypersonalinformation.docx, which would be a Word document, okay? Well, it would, if you get hit by malware, for most of the malware, it would still be called my personal information, but the extension would be changed to something completely unusable that your computer can't read, and the file would be encrypted, so you can't open the file. There's a key that was used to encrypt your files. Unless you have your key, you cannot unencrypt your files. So, if you have a backup, are you in trouble? If you created a system image and have been doing file history on an external drive, are you in trouble? No, you just lost a little bit of time, and you'll have to recover from that, and you'll be back up right to where you were working. Okay? So, who here has really good backups of their computer?
Who does backups?
Yeah.
I do backups,
I do
but they're not all
backups.
that good.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So if you've ever done backups and you've successfully restored your files, even one file to test your backups, you're in good shape. Okay? If you have not done backups, all is not lost. Okay? Because with ransomware, you can almost always boot into Windows. Okay? But you just can't use your files, you can't use your pictures anymore because they're all encrypted. All the stuff that you wanted before, you used before. So, how many of you set restore points on your computers? Or to embarrass you, how many of you don't set restore points on your computers? So if you have restore points turned on for your computers, your computer automatically makes shadow backups in the background of your computer, which means that if you're creating restore points on your computer, you have also enabled the ability to create these hidden backups that are stored somewhere on your computer that you don't want to know where they are. But for every day you've done a backup, you've done a restore point, a copy has been made of your files somewhere on your computer. So you can use something called the Shadow Explorer. And let me see if I have it available. You can use an application called the Shadow Explorer, and you can recover those files. And if you haven't done too much work to overwrite the disk space where those files have been written to, you can recover those files using Shadow Explorer. And Shadow Explorer looks something like, I shouldn't say it looks something like this, it looks exactly like this. And it will come up in just a second here. So you can see, so it actually in the background has recreated all my folders and the different files and systems, then my users folder. It still has my profile here. It's not going to have all my files in it, but it's going to have almost all my files. And these are, what's it going to bring up here? If it has files in it, these are files that can be recovered, okay? So if you were smart enough to set restore points, and when you update Windows from different versions to other versions, remember sometimes Microsoft in its infinite wisdom will turn off your ability to restore. You have to turn it back on again. So don't forget to check after you've done a major upgrade to see if your restore points are on. But anyway, you can use this Shadow Explorer.
It also deletes all your old restore points if you go from like 1809 to 1903.
Right.
So yeah, you want to definitely do a restore before you go, after you do that update.
So Shadow Explorer is something that you need to download. It's not something that's included with your Microsoft stuff. But if you just go down to, if you go to the internet, I'm going to close this now. If you go to the internet, and some of us do that, and you search for Shadow Copy or Shadow Explorer, you will find Shadow Explorer. Tells you. Now don't forget, all this stuff has explanations on YouTube, or you can Google it and you can figure it out.
Well, I have set some restore points when I'm doing something, but I don't set one every day. Do you do that every day?
No, I don't do it every day. I do when I make any kind of major change.
Okay, does that restore the entire?
No.
So
Restore points make a copy of your most important files needed to run your computer. But if you have them set, it's also making shadow copies of all your data and storing them somewhere on your disk that's not being used. The problem is where it's storing them, that area is not protected and can be overwritten. So when you do new restore points, it will create a shadow copy for that day at the same time, if there's disk space available, which is another reason why you don't want to fill up all your disks all the time. You want to leave plenty of overhead. If you have a choice between a 250 and a 500 gigabyte drive and you have 400 gigabytes of data, you probably want to get the bigger drive. You just want to make sure you have enough room. So this is something that you can get it from Bleeping Computers, and they're a pretty good source to download stuff from. I would not get it from I would not get it from download.cnet or some of these other places. Even though it says Shadow Explorer here, it's also what's the actual domain? The name of this domain?
Up and down.
Yeah, it's up to down domain. So you might get some malware with this, or you might get some programs that you don't want down with it. So I always go either from Bleeping Computers, or I go right to the source. And often, in this case, I would either go right to shadowexplorer.com. That's probably the best place to go. Okay. Or I would go to Bleeping Computers, but this would be the best place to go. Whenever you can go to the site, like where would if I want to download the latest version of Malwarebytes, am I going to go to cnet.com? No, I'm going to go to Malwarebytes because I'm going to get the best version that's available, the most true version. So you want to remember that. You always want to look at where these files are coming from. And you always want to get the one that is coming from the domain where they created it, or someplace like that you can trust.
How about 99? Something like that.
Nine Night's usually pretty good. I don't I personally don't use Night because I like doing all my own configuration stuff. But if you are happy, with how they have set up programs like Malwarebytes and things like that, go ahead and use Night. I've only downloaded one virus from Night. I've had one program that was infected. That was a virus. I got it from Night. But
Well, I thought CNET was pretty reputable.
but that doesn't mean that they don't include other
Right.
programs. Like they might include, like drivers.com might be downloaded with something that you get from CNET, where it will not be included if you download it from Malwarebytes. And it will not be included if you download it from Night. Okay? But you have to be real careful where you download your files from. Okay? You want to get them as close to the source as you can. Does that make sense?
Tom, there's a list of places that you can download on just the basics
Mhm.
at the bottom of the list of programs on there that are legitimate.
Mhm.
And CNET is not one,
Oh, is that right?
because of the adware and the other programs like
Yeah.
they slip it in there. And
Uh,
then
Yeah.
when you install it, it's installed in line, then you can't figure out why you got all this other crap on your computer.
Right, and I was using the term malware, but I really meant adware. Thank you, Steve. Stuff that gets included that you didn't order.
Value added software is what they call it.
And it's not always adding value because drivers.com is something that a lot of people get on their computer without even knowing why it's there,
right.
and it really messes up system.
And
And
you
it
got
takes
one of
hours.
those boxes that are checked, and if you don't want to check those boxes,
Exactly.
it's down.
Like even when you download Flash or Adobe Reader and things like that and get a newer upgrade, you have to uncheck,
Yeah, right.
the download McAfee and things like that because you really don't want them because they're basically unvalue added software. They're not doing what you want. Okay, so shadow copy's important. If you and Jim Hurley actually helped the folks at the Theater Arts recover some files using Shadow Explorer. He learned about it through their ISP because they didn't have proper backups. Guess what they have now? iDrive. So they're backing up both locally with file history, and all their computers are going to iDrive. So it's a good system to have. Backing up is real important if you don't want to lose, if stuff you have is important to you. Okay. Smart Screen, we talked about that briefly. Smart Screen is something that Microsoft uses to say whether websites are safe or not. It usually gets turned on automatically in the Windows Defender screen. You can turn it on or turn it off. Does everyone know how to use the snipping tool?
Oh, yes.
Snipping tool is really cool, okay? It's actually included with Windows 10.
You just showed me.
Yeah, it basically, the snipping tool is just a little program that looks like this, okay? You make a new snip, you just say new, you just highlight the screen here, and it puts it into a file for you, okay? Where did it go? It put it there somewhere. Maybe it's in the background or not. Well, no, here it is right there. So it's that little cutout right there. Unfortunately, it's not behaving well with my mouse, so I'm going to have to close that. But the things you can do, you can save it, or you can send it to somebody in an email, or you can print it. It just makes it real easy, and it's included free with Windows 10. So if you've never tried the snipping tool, you should check it out. It's a good way of doing screenshots, and it's easy to do.
You'll see some of it on the videos.
You can do it in email.
Yeah, anywhere, anything that's on the screen, you can make a
You
snippet.
could actually right-click that and copy after you do it, and then paste it directly into your email.
Right. Yeah, you just go.
Quick.
So you would basically do this. You'd say, like I said, my mouse doesn't like this program. You go edit and copy, and then you'd open up like Word or an email or something, and then you just paste it in there. You edit, paste. So that's something that's really kind of a nice thing to do. So if you never use that, you should check it out.
When are they supposed to get rid of that?
They're not getting rid of it, they're changing it.
We're changing it to that other thing that takes a minute to set up.
Right. I need to, what did I lose? Oh, well, it's still here. I just want to remind you of this
While you're
again.
putzing through that, can I say something?
Sure.
You know, you mentioned that you noticed your internet link slowed down there. I changed, yesterday, Joe and I changed the IP ad. We've got a different subnet now for the public and the computer lab in this room.
Okay.
And everything's running through this link sys that was running through an ASUS router before. So tomorrow we're installing, the fastest ASUS router is going to go in this room.
Okay.
And then this one is going to go in the office to run this part of the building.
Well, that'll be
And
good.
it should run faster, because the old Linksys, after I did a speed test through it, was going along at about 20 meg a second through the Ethernet.
Right.
It was really slow.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring this up one more time.
Okay,
This is how much data you really need to save. This is how much you have on your computer. You know, think about it. You know, be smart, manage your data. You don't have to keep everything that you have. Okay. Multiple monitors. How many of you people are using multiple monitors? I mean, it's such a great thing to have multiple. How many have tried it and don't like it? So where have you ever seen multiple monitors being used before?
Almost everybody.
How about right here? Okay. Monitor 1, monitor 2. Okay. How did I make it work? I plugged the cable in here. Okay. And then I can configure it. If it's on the side of me, I can make it so when the mouse moves, you know, up on the screen, it goes to the monitor above. I can configure it to make it work. But it's really nice to have your web browser open on one monitor and your email open on another browser, or vice versa or something. It's nice to have a couple monitors, and you can use just about any monitor as long as you have enough resources in your video card to do it. And most of the computers that we run across can run more than one monitor. So we should probably have a class in that, or a workshop would probably be better to do with that. And then the difference between cloning and extending. What you're not seeing is you're not seeing my desktop up there, because if I were cloning it, you'd see the same thing on both monitors. But what I've done is I've extended my monitor, so I have one full page here and then the extended up here. So that way you get the real value of two monitors by being able to use two as real estate, as workspaces on your computer. The magnifier, I'm not going to bring that one up here, but sometimes our eyes just get tired, you know. In the web browser or something like Adobe, all you do is click on the plus and make it bigger or smaller. In the web browser, and let me just open one up again and I'll come back to it. I'll just open Chrome here. You know that if you click on these little ellipses, these three buttons, usually we see them on their side, but this is ellipses up and down. You can zoom, make it bigger, or make it smaller. So that's kind of a nice thing to do. And then you also have the option in your settings panel to scale the screen to 100%, 125%, 150%, depending on the capabilities of your video card.
And also hit Control Plus.
Yeah, that's the same as.
Minus.
Yeah, that's the same as using those controls, but those are keyboard shortcuts, which we're going to see right down here, keyboard shortcuts. So you preempted me on that, but we'll get there in a minute. Default apps. So if you get a Windows 10 computer, what's your default web browser? Edge, yeah. So how many people use Edge all the time? Not too many people do. In fact, so many people don't use it that Microsoft is changing it and making it more like Chrome, because the engine actually works a lot better. But the way you change that is you go to your settings. See if I can get here to settings. And you just go to your back here. Remember, you can search for just about anything in settings. So if you put in default apps, get close to it. You can choose it either for a particular application for all your browsing, or for a file type. What would be a file type? Well, how about like a PDF? Okay, that'd be a file. How about DOCX? That'd be a file type. So you can change it for your, or you can change it for your protocol, which would be like your internet protocol and things like that. I'm not really sure of an example of that one. Or you can choose which mail app you want to open as your default. So you should play around with this stuff. It's actually pretty cool stuff. Dual boot. The only thing I'm going to say about dual booting is that if you are going to play with dual booting, if you are going to have Windows and Linux on the same machine, make sure you either have a really large hard disk so that when Windows Update comes along, it doesn't blow away your Linux partition, because when Windows Update runs out of space, it will just delete anything on there that's not Windows. But the safest way to do dual booting is to actually have a separate drive for each operating system. So you may want to run your Windows 10 on one disk and Linux on another disk. So we can maybe do that as a lab sometime as well. Virtual machines. Virtual machines are really nice because it allows you to play with different operating systems and stuff and even use them seriously in business. VMware is probably the largest commercial proprietor of virtual machines and things like that. It's very expensive. VirtualBox is something supported and owned now by Oracle, and it's free. It's another utility I use all the time. It can run on Windows or Linux and things like that. You can have multiple machines, and these are things you can also use for backup systems as well, especially for disaster recovery. You can restore your images onto a virtual machine if you want to on another computer, in case you take the chance of losing your data. Keyboard shortcuts. There are all kinds of keyboard shortcuts. What's a keyboard shortcut for copy? Control C. To paste, Control V. Okay. How about to undo? Control Z. Yeah. So these are way back from the early days of computerdom, back with the earliest operating systems. It was kind of cumbersome to try to do everything manually, so they came up with all these keyboard shortcuts. The program I'm thinking of is WordStar. That was one of the originals where a lot of these keyboard shortcuts were created, and they've moved forward. They haven't changed them because they've kind of become the industry standard. On your Windows 10 machines, if you're using a tablet, you probably want to use tablet mode. If you're using a desktop computer without a touch screen, you probably want to use desktop mode. If you have a touch screen desktop computer, you probably want to use either one of them. So you play around with those modes. They're really kind of interesting and a lot of fun to play with. You should change your password once in a while. 10 years isn't often enough.
To get into the computer.
Your computer, yeah, to get into your computer. We were talking earlier, you and I were talking about using a PIN. Okay, so you can set up a really complex 15-character or more password on your computer that connects to the outside world. But if you set up a PIN for that password, let's see if I can go back into settings. I still have it open here. If you set up a PIN in your startup options, probably should have just gone here to PIN, set up PIN sign-in. That way you can use like 4 characters or 6 characters or numbers and things like that. It saves that information on your local computer, your PIN. So you don't have to worry about other people on other computers seeing your PIN. And it's a lot easier than remembering a long password.
Did you say it doesn't have to be 4 digits? It could be characters?
It can be characters or digits or numbers or symbols. Yeah. Got it. Good job. Okay, we talked a little about Windows Hello, and that is how do you use visual authentication on your computer, biometrics. And here's an interesting one that you might want to look at in the future: how to fix the most annoying things in Windows 10. Okay, that has a bunch of things to it. But anyway, so adding a printer is you just go to the add a printer in settings, and it will walk you through it. But we can, like I said, that'd be better for a workshop. But anyway, as we wait for Steve, slow down my computer so I can blame him for it. My internet access, it's all his fault. But remember, when you're working with file systems, you need to follow the yellow brick road. As you go down, you need to go step by step and step along the way. And as Dorothy would say, we could skip ahead a little bit. Just like in Windows, just like Wizard of Oz, if you learn how to follow that yellow brick road through the file system, you'll never get lost. You'll know what to back up, you'll know what to restore, and you'll be sitting pretty. Okay? Yes?
Good job.